Hello, pup parents, and welcome to today's episode of the Perfect Pup Podcast. My name is Devin. I'm very excited for today's episode for a couple reasons. Number one, we have Holly Ovington on with us, and I'm super excited for her to be here. So first off, thanks, Holly, for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
I am as well. And part of that reason I'm excited to chat with you is that we're going to be covering a topic that is unfortunately debated when it shouldn't be, when really there is science to prove and science to show us how we should train our dogs. In this episode, we're going to be talking about why to avoid using aversive methods and why positive reinforcement training works. But before we do that, I just want to give an introduction of Holly so you guys can know who you're meeting right now. Holly, in her own words, has been passionate about dogs from the get-go. She was part of dog clubs from a young age, training her dog and showing her own dogs. She's also certified with the Pryor Academy, a fear-free certified trainer, an instructor for Dog Biz Dog Walking Academy, and first aid certified, and runs her own dog training business in the Vancouver area. And Holly's next goal is to complete a certification in separation anxiety. Did I miss anything on that, or any fun facts that people might want to know?
No, that's great. If there's any fun facts about me, I've always been a sucker for a golden retriever. Loving family dogs, they've always been my thing. But recently, I'm obsessed with German short-haired pointers. And I know realistically, having one for me is probably never going to be feasible, but I just love them so much.
They are beautiful dogs. Whenever I see them at the park or out on walks, I'm always just kind of in awe. I agree with you on that. And I'm excited for this. I think, like I was saying, there is debate among people. You'll hear different people, especially on the internet, who will say, oh, like you can do X, Y, and Z, or you should use X, Y, and Z. And so we're going to kind of break down like why positive reinforcement works, why not to use aversives. But first and foremost, so that we can, get all our listeners on the same page and understand some of the terms that we're going to be using. Could you break down just a little bit what the difference is between positive reinforcement and positive punishment and kind of what those terms mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is something I find people get a bit confused about quite often. So the terms positive reinforcement and positive punishment, they're both part of the 4 quadrants of operant conditioning. So for the most part, there are 2 other parts of it we're not going to bring in today. Either, for the most part, people are positive reinforcement or positive punishment. So what that means in scientific terms, positive is to add something, reinforcement is to increase a behavior, and punishment is to decrease a behavior. So before I lose you all, I'm going to explain that. We won't get too sciencey. So positive reinforcement, what we're doing is we're adding something to increase a behavior. So for example, adding a delicious treat or a toss of a ball or some praise when our dog sits. We like it when our dogs sit, and now it's more likely they're going to do it again. So we're reinforcing that, making it more likely it'll happen. With positive punishment, what happens here is people will add something to decrease a behavior. So that could look like a dog on a shock collar, and when he jumps up, they want to decrease that behavior, so he gets a shock on his neck. And that is, in fact, going to decrease the behavior. Unfortunately, these methods do work, but we're going to get into why they're not the best option.
I love that. So again, just to break that down for folks, the positive side of things, it can get confusing because you hear positive punishment, that seems weird, but the positive is the act of adding something to your dog's environment or situation. The punishment versus reinforcement is trying to get one to go up. Reinforcement gets it to go up, punishment gets it to go down. So on that note, why do you advocate for positive reinforcement? We do as well here at Pupford. We are 100%, we go with what the science says. So why do you personally, and why have you seen that positive reinforcement is the way to go?
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing is that unfortunately, the pet care industry is completely unregulated. Anybody can decide to be a dog trainer. Lots of people who have just simply say, I've had dogs forever and using a spray bottle works or using a choke chain works without any education or without looking at the science. They just go, this works, tunnel vision, and that's what they focus on. So for me personally, I've seen a lot of people do that, and I realized I want to follow what science is telling us and what is updated and up to date. So what we know is that using positive punishment, in fact, works. No one's saying it doesn't work, but it's an easy, quick fix, and it is a big, big, big cost to the dog. Your relationship causes learned helplessness. So your dog is learning that they don't have an escape. They don't get choice. So that's why I don't use positive punishment. The reason I use positive reinforcement is because, well, first of all, our dogs have to eat anyway. Why not utilize something that they need to live to create the behaviors that we want them to do? And it really, really helps strengthen your relationship with your dog, builds trust, builds their confidence. So it's totally different ends of the spectrum, right?
Yeah, I love that. And I think it is important to note what you said, that, positive punishment. So aversives, whether you want to say choke chains, prong collars, e-collars, they can work, but it's like at what cost, and what does it do to our dog's psyche, and what does it do to their mental behavior? So let's maybe go into that just a little more. Like, what can happen if you use aversives? Because like, we all understand how difficult it is to raise a puppy. Like, a lot of us listeners, especially, are right in the thick of it. And it can be a challenge. It can be very difficult, very frustrating. And when you see someone who says, hey, use this prong collar, I used it on my dog and my dog stopped pulling right away, it can be very enticing. So like, what are some of the negative side effects of using those aversives? Can we go a little more into that?
Totally. Yeah. It's really heartbreaking because we see it so often that people are just getting taken advantage of. They look up on the internet, dog trainer, and whatever comes up, whatever they say, okay, if they're saying it's just a little pinch, then it must just be that. It must be fine, right? These people are desperate. It's hard having a puppy who nips at you, or a dog who's barking on leash. Oh my gosh, I get it so much. It is so challenging. So it's really, really heartbreaking that people take advantage of that. So a lot of things that can happen as well. What I always like to focus on and help people understand is that with positive punishment, we're simply just telling our dog, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. Whereas with positive reinforcement, we're saying, hey, do this instead. And if we think about it in a human context, right, with kids, a kid's drawing with crayons on the wall, if we're just saying, don't do that, they're going to go, okay, well, now I'm going to go draw with crayons on the fridge. What do you want me to do instead? But if they're drawing with crayons on the wall and then we say, okay, here, let's go read a book. Let's go do something else instead. It's going to help them do something else. So this can result in, first of all, they're not actively learning. They're just figuring out how to be helpless. So our dogs shut down. It results in a lot of shutdown behaviors. People always say, oh, your dog's so calm. And what do you do? Oh, I've got them on a prong or a shock collar. But in fact, your dog's terrified for the most part. They're scared. They're confused, and they figured out that trying to do these natural dog behaviors doesn't work. So they need to just suppress everything, which is so horribly heartbreaking.
Well, and oftentimes that suppression can lead to outbursts, right? Where, your dog, they don't know how to act. They don't know what they should be doing instead of reacting. And so they just suppress it. They get overwhelmed, trigger stacking, they get overloaded. And then the next thing you know, they bit someone, or, they just took off leash, and you have no way to like, that's like what I've seen a lot as well, is like, yeah, the suppression can work for a little bit, but then it's like, what's going to happen? What's going to be the end result? And I think that's so important to remember, that we want our dogs to learn what to do. And that's like something I know you focus on, and we focus on at Pupford with the content we put out and in the courses we create, is like, this is, if you don't like that your dog is barking at the door, teach a replacement behavior, teach them what you want them to do. So what one other like kind of thought, because I know it can be awkward and it can be difficult when like, so I, for example, I've used this before. I was walking my dog down the street, had him on a front clip harness, just working on leash walking, rewarding as we're going, that type of thing. And some random guy in my neighborhood, I've never had a conversation with him in my life. He comes up to me and he's like, "Oh, you training your dog?" And I was like, "Yeah, we're working on these things." "Oh, well, you should, if your dog jumps on you, you should stand on their back paws. Like, then they won't do it anymore." And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, first of all, who are you? Get out of my face. But second of all, like, why? Like, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to inflict punishment on my dog? So my question for you is like, how do you respond to people face to face, or maybe it's on social media or on, comments and stuff? Like, how do you respond to people? Because I think we all know that if you just come out and say, "No, you're wrong. No, that doesn't work. No, that's bad." Like, people just get defensive. There's no learning that occurs. So how can pup parents respond to people who are recommending aversive methods to them?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. I'm actually really happy you asked that. And you know what I think is important to think about is nobody ever decided to change their mindset by somebody fighting on social media. So that's something I definitely don't do. If somebody reaches out to me and says, "Hey, why are you using treats? Why would you do that? Let's use like a prong collar." I would say, "Well, here's what the science says. The science says we can do it in a better, more humane way. We can use food, we can use praise, we can build their confidence." And that's what I'm choosing to do. And if you have any questions about that and you want to learn more about it, I'm more than happy to help you. So I always kind of try and approach these things in a way where I say, I understand that you might feel that way, because you know what, like my parents, they used choke chains. This science it's still evolving and it's fairly new. And as I mentioned, this industry is unregulated. People can do whatever they want, unfortunately. So I always just like to educate about what the science is showing us and the ways that we can just simply do better. And I also make sure to never shame somebody for it. I'm never going to say, "You're the worst for having your dog on a shock collar," or "You're the worst." If they're arguing, even then, I'm never going to shame, because a lot of times owners just simply don't know. They simply just don't know. And nobody warns about how bad things can get using these tools, and how hard it can be for your dog, and how suppressing it can be. So I guess my advice for pup parents would be, stay calm if somebody does that to you, and say, "Well, you know what, I'm very comfortable with this, and my dog and I are very happy. And, we use food. My dog has to eat anyway, and he really enjoys it. And if you wanted to do that, well, I'm happy to talk about it, but thanks for your input, and I'm not interested." Yeah.
I love that. And I think, approaching it with, this is why I'm doing it, giving people the why is often a good way to kind of put those conversations at bay, because in reality, oftentimes, like you said, especially on social media or on the internet, people aren't going to like change their opinion based off of what you're telling them. So oftentimes it's easier to just, this is the way that I've chosen to do things. And then what we can do as pup parents, and then, as yourself as a trainer, myself, I work at a dog training company, is like, we can do as much as we can personally to advocate for positive reinforcement, to share articles that are using positive reinforcement, to talk about things that are science-backed ways of our dogs learning. I think it's super important. Before we wrap up, I know that, that a lot of people, they hear like maybe this episode, they're like, "Okay, I won't use aversives. Like, I won't do those things." I always like to ask trainers this, like, I think we all know that a lot of pup parents are struggling and it's difficult. It is a challenge. So what is like one major piece of advice or a couple thoughts that you have for people who are like, "I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling a little bit down right now." Like, what is something that people can start doing today based off of positive reinforcement that is going to help improve their relationship with their dog, and of course, improve their dog's behavior as well?
Yeah. So in short, I think the best thing that I could say, Snap, you can start doing today, is first of all being really patient with them. Your dog is a sentient being. They have their own thoughts. They have their own feelings. And most of the behaviors they're doing are natural dog behaviors. They're pretty annoying to us, but they're very natural and normal for dogs to be doing. So my best advice would be to try and shift the way that you think about what your dog is doing. I see often a lot of people are going, oh my gosh, my dog is jumping up all the time, or they're counter surfing all the time. And I'm thinking 24/7, really? Probably not. So how can we adjust that and think about, how about when your dog has all four paws on the ground, why don't we choose to reward them for that? Or when your dog chooses not to jump up on the guest, why don't we reward them for that? Or when your dog is just calmly sitting or happens to be walking on a loose leash, let's take advantage of those times when they're doing the things we like and reinforce. So use food to increase those behaviors. So yeah, I think that just starting to look at your dog and go, oh, I guess I have a break right now. And then you can go, oh, they're doing something I like, so I should go reinforce that. That's what I would say would probably be a good thing for pet parents to start working on.
I love that. I think that's great advice. I think we can all use the reminder frequently to focus on the positive, not just in our own lives, but with what our dogs are doing. And I think when you boil it down, that's why I think positive reinforcement is just such a better way to approach things than the punishment side of things. Because I think with the punishment, you're always focusing on the bad. What are they doing wrong? What do I need to correct? What do I need to punish them for? Whereas with the positive reinforcement is, what is my dog doing good? How am I going to reinforce that? I want that to happen more. Let me reward them for that. So I love it. Thank you so much, Holly, for coming on. I've learned a lot. I enjoy these conversations, and I think, our listeners will, enjoy this extra emphasis on why to avoid aversives and continue with the positive reinforcement, even though it might be challenging. So thank you so much for coming on and discussing this important topic.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been an awesome conversation. I'm excited for people to hear it.
I am as well. And for all of you listening or watching, please let us know how you like this episode. We look at all the reviews and comments that you leave. We love getting feedback on, what topics you want to hear more about or what topics are interesting to you. So wherever you are, please, reach out to us and let us know. We love the feedback. And beyond that, we will catch you guys on the next episode.